sure that everything is working in the background, folks. So, yeah. So with that, I'll just pass it off to our moderator, our main moderator, Matthew here.
Great. Thank you, John. Yeah, my name is Matthew Melvin. I am an environmental resources specialist with the city of Miami, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Mr. John Harris. I'll go ahead and read a quick bio on John before we kick things off this afternoon. So John is an urban forester, consulting arborist, and landscape designer with over 40 years of experience in the green industry across North America and the Caribbean. Currently, John is the principal of Landscape Economics, LLC, an expert company for assessing and valuing damage claims involving trees or landscapes or natural areas. He is also an expert for personal injury or wrongful death cases involving trees or landscapes, utility line clearance, arboriculture, landscaping, and green industry practices. John is also the president of Earth Advisors, Inc., an independent green industry consulting and project management company for urban forestry, arboriculture, landscape, and environmental consulting services. His qualifications include being an ASCA registered consulting arborist, ASCA tree and plant appraisal qualified, SAF certified forester, ISA certified arborist, ISA tree risk assessment qualified, ISA Florida trained nursery tree grader, LIAF certified landscape inspector, Florida DEP registered professional mangrove trimmer, and CTLA trained tree and landscape appraiser. He was inducted into the Lambda Alpha International Honorary Land Economic Society in 1997 for his dedicated work determining and defending tree and landscape values. He has 4 college degrees: Master of Science in Forest Economics from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, Master in Business Admin from Syracuse, Bachelor of Science in Resources Management from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and Associates of Applied Science in Natural Resources Conservation from SUNY Morrisville, Agricultural and Technical College. John has owned and managed landscape maintenance, landscaping, and tree care companies, and worked as a consultant in utility forestry in both the US and Canada. He has additionally provided business management consulting for a number of nurseries, landscape contractors, and tree care companies in South Florida. John is an instructor for the John Scott Daly Florida Institute of Government, has been an associate professor at Miami-Dade College and Seminole County Community College, and has been a vocational teacher with the Miami-Dade County School Board. He has provided education workshops and seminars for over 75 organizations and businesses, including the Society of American Foresters, the International Society of Arboriculture, Florida Urban Forestry Council, the Landscape Inspectors Association of Florida, Fairchild Tropical Botanical Garden, and Vermont Urban Forestry Council. John has appeared on TV in Florida and New York as an expert forester and arborist. He has been published in newspapers, magazines, and trade journals regarding forestry, arboriculture, urban forestry, landscape maintenance, and tree appraisals. And just as a quick disclaimer prior to letting John take it away, speaking from the municipal side, I would always strongly advise any of my consulting arborists to always confer or to reach out to the local municipality that they're working within to better understand or gauge interest in, what is the particular interpretation of this particular House bill. It's going to vary from municipality to municipality. So it's always good to have clear and open communication with the forester or the enforcing agent within that particular municipality within a timely manner. And with that, I'll go ahead and let John take it away. Thank you.
So am I on?
You are on, John.
I am on. All right. Well, I was on when I woke. I was on when I woke up this morning, but I want to make sure I'm on for this class. As a lot of people know, I get up every day and this is what I do and this is what I'm all about. So as Matt said, I'm here to assist all of us in paying more attention to, I will say, specific terms that are in the current version of this law so that we are working with it and that we stop trying to find ways or think of ways to work around it. And one of the themes to, I'll just say, the success of my career and or my reputation. So here's a side note to start, is what Matt just told you. If you have a question and you're working in Miami on a project as a consultant, or for the sake of it, you're the landscape inspector in Miami working, and you're not sure how to look at this tree, the identification of the tree, conditions, there is a whole group here in Landscape Inspectors Association that are available to help you. And most, if not all the members will help you if you take a moment to reach out to them in some way or the other. And when we're doing projects, even when it involves this particular law and a property owner who is bound and determined that they have a tree, or I'll just say the tree, that can be removed without a permit in city XYZ, we always tell them that part of our work, if you're going to sign our contract, is we will be talking to that local agency, that city, that county, to make sure that they know that we're doing this project, what our opinion is going to be, and you as a property owner decide. So with that, let me get into the presentation and see if the information that I have to share is going to take you from where you're at right now today in what you know and how you do your work in regards to following this law. And when we're done, hopefully I'll have made some changes that will help you do a better job or follow the law more successfully, either as a consultant writing reports and or as a municipal inspector, code enforcement officer, or landscape architect as well, who is doing reviews and deciding whether there's a tree to come back to or the tree actually did meet the law. So let me see that I can grab the screen. Looks like I can.
Yeah, it looks like you're all set, John. We can see it on our end.
Okay. And you're not getting the line of people over the top of the presentation, are you?
I am not.
Okay, perfect. So it'll just bother me, but nobody else.
And then, John, before we started, did you
Go
want
ahead.
the questions to be inputted within the chat box or ask questions in real time?
Yeah, in the chat is fine. Let me see something here. And this is gonna have screwed me up for a moment because it did it the last time.
Yes, everybody, please, if you have questions, just type them into the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll be sure to have John address those.
Yeah, I'm gonna, so that I can keep this better organized. So we're here to talk about not just how consultants, arborists, landscape architects, or I'll just say other professionals or non-professionals think they can write reports that meet the current terms of the Florida Statute 163.045, which I know everybody here is interested in how people are doing that. But I am here to talk to the Landscape Inspectors Association members about when and how local governments can enforce your regulations related to trees that are being presented, or I'll say removed already, in relation to whether or not they met the terms of Florida Statute 163.045. And I do want to emphasize that for me, there is a theme, a purpose, or a mission, and this is the group of people who are the professionals, and I'll say today in Miami-Dade County, but elsewhere, that are doing the inspecting, the permitting, and enforcement so that we still have protected and provided sustainable and resilient landscapes and trees in Miami-Dade County's future. So let's see that we can continue to follow that theme and follow that opportunity. Matt did a good job, or more than a good job, reading through my long biography as opposed to my CV, but it's always important to me when I'm attending to know that the speaker has not only something that they want to say, but they have the ability to say it. And I will already say that most of the people on this presentation know me for where I'm at, where I've been, and I don't have to spend any more time on it. So if you have some specific, as Matt said, questions, or you have points that you're hoping I'm going to cover, either during or at the end of this presentation, please do put them down, because this is your class for your time, spending it with me, and I expect to be providing you information that you were expecting to hear about, or answer the one question that you had that nobody's answered before. So let's see that I can do that. So the current version of the law, I'm just going to say, is really easy to find. You can look it up online in many different ways. The first place you should look for is to look for how it was exactly written and listed in the actual documents coming from our state government. So this is what it looks like printed out from that website. It's pretty short for all of the time that we spend on it, for all of the effects that this has for the trees in our communities. There's not a whole lot of words here. So one of the things that we do, that I suggest that you try and do, is to pull that information out so that you can work through it in your own documents. You know, put it at a size of font that you can read more easily. Move the sentences around to find all of the terms that really are the important terms in this. And I will say that there are a lot of people writing reports that they think meet the terms of this law, or that are in municipalities where people are complaining trees are being removed, and you're not sure if the reports that are being written do or don't meet the terms of this law. Or you may have advice from your city attorney that says, if they say they have a report, stop asking questions, because we're not going to pursue them. Which to me is an attorney who hasn't talked to enough other city attorneys. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a few minutes. So starting off where we left off in my class from last November, we talked some about some of the terms, some of the information, but let me point out these terms and put them all up in one slide so that you can look at this as a better reference. So for me, the most important term is that documentation is required. Although the documentation, as it's stated in the statute, really talks about a site assessment. It doesn't talk about the reporting. So the actual site inspection, site assessment is part of the documentation. And the certified arborist isn't just a Florida certified arborist. They could have a certification from any part of the world that they got certified, just to point that out, or be a Florida licensed LA. So only these two professional qualifications count for somebody writing that report and or doing the site inspection. The second most important term is residential property, which was better defined in the current version, where we have a single family residence now. But per local code definition, there are certain cities where single family residences can be up to a duplex, possibly even a triplex. So the type of building and or land use that's on the residential property in your city is something that I'm going to tell you, you need to get clear. And you'll hear me say exactly that about a few of these. These are the terms that you need to get clear, or have clarity, or have a definition of, that everybody in your city works with together, so that you are consistently reviewing reports for their accuracies and inaccuracies, as well as all of the, what we really enjoy talking about, all of the tree related conditions and risks, and, you know, getting out in the field. You know, this law is more about sitting at the desk reading and looking up definitions than it is about getting out into the field and telling whether a tree really has a reason to remove or not. Because for me, that's the easy part. So the risk level, an unacceptable risk to persons or property. For me, this should be a high risk or even an imminent hazard. And the important part of this is it's not the opinion of the property owner that counts. It's the determination or the opinion, and I will say written in a document as part of documentation from the certified artist or the landscape architect. So I'm looking for these exact terms to be in that report somewhere. Or if they're not, that's my ding, ding, ding signal as a reviewer that this particular arborist or landscape architect, and I will say the honest ones, meant to not include that in the report because they're not recommending removal because the tree is a high risk, imminent hazard, has multiple targets, is half dead, or is fully dead. So these terms should be the bell ringers that, as I'm putting them up, they're meant to be. So the on-site assessment performed in accordance with the ISA tree risk assessment BMPs in the second edition 2017. So yeah, we all need to have this exact edition. We're talking about following the BMPs. We're not talking about following every step in every document in the tree risk assessment qualification training class. So my, I'll say, professional opinion shared today as an expert in the field, but not meant to be speaking for ISA, is that this is following the procedures performed in accordance with. So you may think that you're required to use all the ISA forms to do the tree risk assessments and put those in your report, or at least in your file for every single tree that you do. And I can agree with you, but there are others that can follow those procedures without having to fill out the form for every tree. So again, deciding how you're going to follow your practice as being a professional that actually is doing these inspections, writing these reports. And then also on the other side, what your city is looking at as a quote standard in order to judge or to review and approve or disapprove the reports that are written as the argument for or against a tree being removed that meets the terms of FS163.045. Here's another, again, important point, obviously, because I have put it in the list. The only means of practically mitigating its risk or the tree's risk below moderate, again, following the terms and tree risk assessment from ISA, is removal. So there are probably most of the trees that I would see, and I'm just going to say, looking out the window at my front yard, at my trees, it's hard for me to find a tree that doesn't have something in it that may have a moderate level of risk. But maybe that requires pruning a branch as opposed to deciding that because that branch is dead or because I have a broken leader in the top half of the canopy, the tree needs to be removed. So are there other arboricultural practices or even changes to the site that can reduce the risk identified for that tree to be below moderate for that tree on that site with the targets it has? So even, I'll just say potentially moving a sidewalk to be outside the canopy area, or moving a fence, or relocating the tree, not an 80-inch diameter oak tree, but there may be other actions aside from removal that are practical or reasonable. And I think every report needs to have options in it if the tree risks are not so obvious, again, like it's half dead or there is a cavity in the base of it that already has cracks around it. So the tree is moving back and forth in a 20-mile-an-hour wind as you're standing there. So again, my example there is meant to bring us back to these trees that are written by a certified arborist or landscape architect to meet the terms of this law should be trees that would meet the terms of this law, no matter who looked at the tree. So the owner decides about the removal, not the certified arborist, and I should say not the landscape architect. We're here to provide our advice. We're here to apply our expertise and experience and our qualifications, but we are not the decider. One of the things just related to my company name that I enjoy saying a lot is that actually, Mrs. Jones, you are the decider. You are the owner of the property. My company is Earth Advisors, not Earth Deciders. And there's a point to that. I'm only here to provide you with advice and information. You need to make the decision. So another thing, which this is just kind of a discussion point, I have an answer for myself that I think is true. So can you have different reported tree conditions based on the current conditions? Or are you being asked to do an inspection as to this tree is going to be a hazard because we're going to be cutting the roots on one side within 1 foot of the 20-inch diameter mahogany tree? I'll just say in the city of Miramar, as a for instance, along the swale in this homeowner association. So once we cut those roots, this tree is going to become a hazard. And so we think it meets the terms of the law today, and that we should get to remove it without a permit because it's a hazard. And I will say, once you do the work, if you do that, it makes it a hazard. But I would be coming back after you did that, and maybe you'd have the violation that you deserve for doing that. And then I may have a hazard tree. But today, the tree is not a hazard. And there are options to follow aside from just cutting the roots and deciding that you have to remove the tree. So again, a simple example, or maybe not so simple, of how this happens, you know, live and in person, and some of the discussion that you probably should be having with certain people. The other example that I have, which we run into way more often, is we're looking at a tree and currently it is a mess. You know, it has sprouts on it from old stub cuts, and the sprouts have been growing probably 10 years, if not 20 years. A lot of dieback. I got hollows at the base in and around where those sprouts are connected, and or I have hollows as well as potentially cracks in the base where those leaders are attached to the tree. So I have many times been on a property where the existing tree is a high hazard with multiple targets. It is a danger or has an unacceptable risk. Sorry, I'm using the old term, not the new term. Unacceptable risk to persons or property, and I recommend removal. And the homeowner is also in agreement that they're looking to remove it. But the cause of that are actions that otherwise would be a tree abuse violation in that particular city. Again, those are trees that I like to have a discussion with the city reviewers, code officers, before I am done with that project. And many times our company policy is we'll provide a copy of our report with agreement from the property owner to one of the inspectors at city XYZ so that they can review it and decide that we've met the terms and that they're going to agree with this tree being removed. And just because, again, these are easy examples for me, any tree in Coconut Grove in the city of Miami, we are telling that property owner, we won't even do your inspection if you don't agree that we're going to talk to the city before you decide you aren't going to remove the tree, if and only if we do our report and are willing to write that it has an unacceptable risk to persons or property. And other cities have their sections like Coconut Grove where every neighbor is watching every neighbor, and or people are really concerned because the trees and the tree canopy is what makes that neighborhood something great. So my summary is know what's required in the on-site assessment and the documentation to qualify that tree removal under the terms of this FS163.045. Knowing it more gives you the ability to have reasons as an inspector, as a code officer, as a city attorney, as a plan reviewer, to request and review these reports, whether somebody thinks you should be able to or not. So again, and here it is, all in one slide. You know, you can take this and make a poster of it. And that's what I mean it to be for some people, because it could be really useful. But any tree that's being put up to be removed as meeting the terms of this law would be a tree that in most cities would already have had all of these reasons and would have met the ability to be approved as a tree removal under that city's code. My humble opinion, it's just that simple, and it should be that simple. You know, a queen palm with Ganoderma is a dead queen palm fallen somewhere sometime soon. There really isn't a need to go any further than that. So I'm not going to go over all these terms again, but the person who did the on-site assessment needs to be the person who is an ISA certified arborist or landscape architect. Having your administrative staff, having your arborist trainee, having your draftsperson in your LA practice do the site inspection is not doing the on-site assessment. Information, the documentation for me needs to include the terms that are relevant, most important, or what I put up in the last slide, the key terms and the key information that makes that a report that justifies and or explains and or supports that there is unacceptable risk, that there is a tree with targets, that there is a tree that removal is the reasonable option to bring the risk to that tree below moderate. You know, residential property, this is pretty straightforward, although, you know, we still get calls from shopping malls saying, I was told that if you come and inspect the tree, that I can get this removed. And I said, at your house, not in the parking lot of the mall. So was the on-site assessment performed in accordance with ISA tree risk assessment BMPs? How do you know? And in a sense, how does the arborist or the landscape architect who wrote the report, did the assessment, wrote the report as written documentation, show that they did it? Because they put the information and the terms in their report. So me, I want to show that we did it as opposed to try and find a way that nobody knows. So we're all about the terms, but you guys know I'm all about the terms anyways. So you, as the inspector, the reviewer, the code officer, the plan reviewer, your professional opinion counts. Was that removal the only means of practically mitigating the risk of that particular tree below moderate? Do you agree with what was determined? Do you agree with what I expect to see? Photos of the tree, different parts of the tree that are in the report, or you may be going to the latest, I'll say Google Street View or aerial photos to try and get any evidence of what that tree looked like before it was already gone, or the neighbor's photos that they took and emailed to you when they made the complaint about a tree being removed and they don't think they got a permit. My opinion is that you do get to review the reports. You do get to agree, because a report written falsely based on not facts, but based on mystery is not a report that meets the terms of this law, so that the removal didn't meet the terms of this law. And I'll play click. This is not legal advice. This is me as an expert that the lawyer comes to ask what they should use and how they should define the opinions that they provide. So who's responsible for the tree that gets removed on a residential property? One and only one, the owner. That's how every code that I know in a county or city works, and that's where the enforcement starts. So educating the owner as to who they need to talk to next, i.e. the certified arborist or landscape architect that got them into this mess and gave them the opportunity to think that as long as they got a report, whatever they paid for it, whether the person came to the property or not, gave them the right to remove the tree and nobody can ask any questions. I don't know who teaches that, but if anybody here knows who teaches that and where that class is, I'd like to go. at least so I know how somebody's explaining that actually is true and or can work as a business practice or as an ethics, as an ethical certified arborist or landscape architect. So does the tree as it stands, or it's already gone, have an unacceptable risk? My opinion is you can review it. You should review it, but you do need support of all of the other people in your city. And especially you need a city attorney or attorneys or the consulting attorney to give you the legal opinions somehow, some way in writing, so that you know that when you decide to bring a code case, it's not just going to be set aside and then you're going to be marked for overstepping what the city is looking for you to enforce. I get that. People call me and talk to me about just that happening and what are they going to do and whether they want to work in the city anymore or not. So again, my bottom line, in a sense, this is only supposed to allow people to remove trees that actually are hazards that anybody in their right mind would agree it was a hazard, not to remove trees that they want to get rid of so that it's not in the way when they decide that they're going to take their 2,000 square foot house and get it built to 4,000 square feet because they don't want $50,000 in tree mitigation when they're going to do that 2 years from now. That's not what this law was meant to do. So this is an example. You probably aren't going to be able to read it that well, but this is a letter with legal opinions written by a city attorney with Coral Gables. You will see that this is from 2019. So some of what's stated in here is about the prior version of the law, not the current version of the law. I do that on purpose because I'm not trying to put up what the current opinion for Coral Gables city attorney is so that people just take it without following up. So this is an example of, to me, an attorney who did their job as opposed to just said, well, there's a statute and we don't want to have anything to do with not following that statute and or having code cases where people are going to argue with us. This is somebody who actually went through and, like I did with you today, pulled out most of the I'll say the important terms, the important sections, provided some context as well as legal opinions related to it, provided some guidance for their staff, provided some backup in the would be the last large paragraph on the right side here about other places in this specific letter, Escambia County, where the enforcement was followed and how that works and why, in their opinion, this is a city that will be able to question trees that are removed with the excuse that they got a report from a certified arborist. When the homeowner is asked to provide that, the homeowner can't even provide a sheet of paper, much less an email. So how does that serve as documentation anyway? So let me just check my time, not doing too bad. So now we move from, there's the terms, there's where I think you stand as a landscape inspector in Miami-Dade County, or I know there's people from other places here, wherever else you're working, as far as how this law can be applied, how the terms can be defined, and how somebody who works in this industry, who works, I'll say, within these terms and defining these terms on a weekly, if not daily basis, has basically put this together for our practice so that I can be here as a resource to help you with your practice. So click, that ends that part of the class. Now, what a lot of people are here for is, what about those arborist reports and what are they supposed to look like or not look like? So you want to have, a standard formatted layout. The report needs to say who it's for and why it's written. You want to worry as a professional. This isn't about, dear Frank, thanks for letting me inspect your tree. I think it's a high risk too. Please go ahead and remove it. And no, I don't need to provide any pictures. And don't worry about paying me because I just did this as a friend. And I say that for one point there. You're not a professional if you didn't get paid. So the report is worth exactly what that person got paid for. So even a friend needs to pay something for the report so that it was a report that was purchased and you are following your ethics, that you got paid to be a professional in doing that assessment or writing a report, or I'm sorry, documentation. These are just my advice for doing better writing or following current standards. Some of this we've talked about before. So you always need to include what's required to meet the terms of or to meet the use of your report, not less. I.e., if you don't say it's an unacceptable risk, then how is anybody else supposed to decide or determine that there was an unacceptable risk somewhere in what you wrote? You know, don't write less, write what's required. But the other part of it is that writing 3 or 4 pages about what you think this law is about or not about, and how it gets enforced or doesn't get enforced, and whether or not oak trees are a better species than bald cypress trees for landscapes and residential properties in Palmetto Bay, is a lot more information that's needed, can make the report really confusing, and or make it, in my opinion, disturbing as a report as opposed to useful. So don't just write more so that your report is worth what you're charging for it. Write what needs to be in there. That's what makes it worth what it was paid for. As well as just the other side of it is, when that report gets shared with the local authorities to review it, it's easy for them to review it and make a decision that you are an ethical landscape architect, you are an ethical certified arborist, and they would enjoy you doing more work in their city and can give you their response faster than they might for other people who wrote about one tree and whether it was or wasn't, or did or didn't contain unacceptable risks, in 6 pages of everything that they had to say about all the environmental conditions in the landscape. You know, be the one people want to work with, be the one that gives people the information that they need. So again, I went through some of this in the report writing last year. I'm just putting it up again because it's just as important this year as far as having an organized report and some of the sections that are in reports. And I will say again, not every report, especially a report for a simple, I'll just say, dead palm tree or dying palm tree that has Ganoderma conchs the size of your hand. You know, there's not a lot that needs to be said about that. But the photo is what counts. So, you know, stopping and saying that photos in every report are, for me, what makes a difference, because they provide the facts and you don't get to write your way around the facts unless you're a really good photo editor. But that's a whole different class. So there are plenty of other resources and classes you can take and degrees you can get in writing and English and even scientific report writing. So let's move on and take a look at a couple things. So this is a bad example. I'm going to say there is on the top, the header that would be this company's name information. Underneath the date would be the address and the client name. But you know, the purpose of the report, established tree inventory at the subject property. Okay, and here's a list of trees, a little bit of information, but I don't think this meets anybody's code requirements for a tree disposition plan or reporting about the tree. No opinions or recommendations are in this. The lower squared out is where the certified arborist, who was a certified arborist, currently actively certified, had their signature. So you know, this is even more simple than obviously reports that you guys are getting in and having to, as I said before, weed your way through or read your way through to try and find what they should have said and where anywhere it says about unacceptable risk and what those risks are, what the targets are, what the condition of the tree is. But let me give you a kind of rest of the story. So here's a Miami-Dade police report for property. And the bottom line here, which again, you may not read in the narrative, is that this was a neighbor who called the Miami-Dade police because there was a large oak tree being removed, as well as some other tree debris and possibly other trees being removed on an empty lot adjacent to her property. The police department showed up and ding, ding, ding. This is why this is an example from me to all of you. The police department wrote a report regarding these trees being removed. They stopped the work on the site the trees were being done. They required the owner to be there to explain to them what was being done, why they thought they had the right to do that, whether they had a permit. The last thing here that's on this report, and again, I'll say ding, 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 is Mr. XYZ was advised that he needed to have a permit to remove the oak tree from the lot. That kind of gives you a good start for a code case. But then if you come back to the report that was written, here's a report that doesn't talk about the tree being there. Here's a report that just leaves everything out. So somebody getting this report written to turn in as a part of trying to go forward on the property where they actually had an ongoing active violation that hadn't been resolved, I guess was a good try, but I myself wouldn't have been the arborist that wrote the report that then gets embroiled in why they wrote that report, didn't get the rest of the information, and why they had nothing to say about the tree that was already removed without a permit. But one thing that they did do is they didn't try and include that tree and give it reasons for removal. So at least they kept themselves out of that. So I'm just giving you I guess a more interesting example that has some background and some complication to it, as opposed to some of the just straightforward, here's a picture of an oak tree that the neighbor took, and there isn't anything that you can see that would be a reason for removal structurally, including any, dead branches in it, or, it's lifted and leaning over. So where did the unacceptable risk come from that the arborist wrote in that report? And then later that day, that arborist tree crew actually removed the tree, got paid, and left. Those to me are easier reports, and they don't have as long a story. So let me show you a couple of examples of reports. Yes, reports that have our name on it and or my signature on it. And I'm going to try and pull these up. And hopefully it'll come up on the screen, but we'll see. So I'm just overlapping them to bring them up. I'm going to show you one report first. So somebody tell me that this is showing well.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So title of the report, purpose of the report, not just the report date, but actually the related inspection date, so that you can time when the inspection was done, who it's for, why it's for. Full disclosure, these are clients that are fully willing to let me share reports we wrote for them that worked out well for their projects anytime that I want. So don't worry about me actually showing you who it is or where the property was. These are reports and projects that have already gotten started, and I don't have any problem with somebody asking what happened and why from anybody. So in the summary, ISA level 2 true risk assessment, visual from the ground only, looking for impacts, following industry standards and guidance. We're picking up the terms that we need to have, results recommendations. These 2 trees on this property are prohibited species, Brazilian pepper. Disposition recommendations. Here is my standard language for related to all our reports that are on residential properties. So property owner decides whether they notify or they don't, and who they will contract for any services outside of the report that we provided. It's a big deal to have that in your reports if you're an arborist or a landscape architect doing this. And if you're not sure, talk to your own attorney, or better yet, talk to your insurance agent about having statements like this in any report that you send out for any reason. And then we always talk about, even though it's not required, we still recommend replacements, because removing trees that are hazards is something that we believe is good for the public and good for our property. But we also believe that replacing them in locations where there's room for another tree is also important. So this is running sideways just because that's the way that page is. I'll turn this page over. So standard tree data, disposition worksheet should be the same as what mostly everybody else does. Danger removals, they're invasive. So, but removal wasn't meant to mean just because they were invasive. So here's some of our standard data sheets that come out of our inventory program. These trees are a mess, causing damages to the outside of the property. Like I said, there should be reports written where it's obvious or I'll just say painful when you look at the photos as to why that tree's even still there at the time that somebody came and did the report. It's a mess. Potential for this falling over onto the house that's actually the neighbor's house nearby, exists. So everything about this screams, yeah, reasonable removal, no need to question it. Well, at least to me. Everybody has their own opportunity for how they review it and what they see or they don't see. So that's report example number 1. So report example number 2, this is a report for a tree and plantation. This may be a little more interesting. So again, information about how it's done, why it's done, terminology, results and recommendations. Here you can see up front, we're not giving a bold statement about what this tree is and what it's about. So let's take a look. Here's the data for the tree. Again, providing all the standard data, which should be standard data that you want to find in a report. Because to me, the documentation for removing a tree under this exemption should be the same documentation that an arborist or landscape architect provides in their work every day, which is, to me, why it's standard information. So what's interesting here is that prior to us inspecting this tree, there was a lot of prior damages, actually more than one time, related to the root system of this tree, causing damages under the ground, even to city utilities, and the city spending thousands of dollars to get the water service turned back on. And as it turns out, the water service turned back on not just for one house, but because this branches between 2 houses. So I agree. If I was looking at these photos, there's not much wrong with this tree. Why would anybody consider this tree to be a hazard the way it stands today in the place that it is? Well, the trenching starts somewhere out here in the middle of the swale, goes through, yes, that's a new section of sidewalk after sidewalk got removed, and up into the yard, continue into the yard, right underneath the root crown, and I'll just say, make it easy, on the left side of this tree, removing the root system for a depth of somewhere approximately 3 feet through and under this tree. But they did put a new patch of sod when they put down and put back what's now the automated meters into the ground. So they did take the opportunity to improve the water service. So, what happened, what I'm showing in the photos, where we're at. There is some other information about the the structure of these trees and some potential about, again, like I talked about before, there is some future potential hazards in these trees, but they are potential, they're not existing. So here I have a tree, along with having had the roots cut off in the past and or causing damages today, being within 34 inches of the edge of the poured and paved concrete, driveway. A pretty deep crack and a crack starting, but again, not reasons for removal, just observations. So what are the main reasons for the removal? I don't know how many of the roots have been removed, but I do know that on the left side, which is the west side of this tree, I don't have many roots left holding this tree up. It's a beautiful tree. It's a huge oak, but you know, all that damage is done. And done for, you know, reasons above and beyond whether or not a tree gets saved on a property. So with that, I do want to say we're here to make a difference, and we're trying to make a difference with all of you. So I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you giving me the time to share at least where I'm at with this law and where I've been at in being a resource for multiple cities and counties, as well as just individuals that are trying to find ways to enforce their regulations. And then also, obviously, a resource for those who are trying to write reports and follow the ethics we're supposed to follow. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. You can find out about our company on your own. So I'll just bring up and let me see what we have as far as questions in the chat. This is a good time to get back to that. John and Matt, does anybody have any other concluding remarks before I get into trying to answer some questions?
No, I mean, just to answer them as we've got them here. I mean, there's quite a few. So, I mean, this is it's not exactly easy stuff for everyone to understand. So,
No. Yeah.
So you want me to just start up from the beginning?
Well, I have them in the chat, so
Okay.
so I can scroll through them if you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Mo-
I'll try and
most
cover any that
You're
we
okay.
don't.
Yeah. Most people know that when I'm presenting, I try and keep focused. So let me see how I do. So in HOAs, approving or not tree removals, yeah, the bogus assessments. So yeah, old Ganoderma conchs that are on actual oak trees are Ganoderma conchs with fungus that are eating dead wood. So yeah, would that be a sign of damage and or dead wood in a tree? Yes. But Ganoderma conchs that are on trees are not a reason for removal. There's a lot more information that's necessary. You know, Ganoderma conchs on a palm, there really isn't any other decision to make. And usually the palm, by the time you see a conch, is already in a health condition that's much worse off. But I can give you more information if you want to contact me directly as well, and just some examples if you want of how this is handled. Because just because it has a fungus doesn't make it a tree with unacceptable risk to persons or property. It just means that it's an old tree. You know, I've got some scabs on me that in a sense could be caused by a fungus or disease as well, but I'm still alive. So Laura's right. You know, there's more terms to be put in and to be put together. So saying that's a single family home that's detached makes sense to me. But then again, there are cities that are allowing for the single family residents to include duplexes because that's what meets the term of residential in their code. I don't make those decisions, but I do follow them and I do give advice on them. So letters being produced after the fact of the tree being removed, does that allow for the arborist to have done a assessment of the tree and the conditions of the tree and determine the hazards before it was removed? I would say it does not. But again, the condition of the tree based on photos before it got removed and the opportunity to be able to, you as a professional, make a decision and or make a review is important. So if they didn't take any pictures, you wonder that they didn't take them on purpose, of course, but there's still an opportunity to require review and to require documentation, and documentation being what's defined in the ISA BMPs, but also documentation that your city normally requires for a tree removal permit or for a tree permit or plan review. And if I sound like a recording, I'm trying to, because that's what you should be saying every time. The report in the city of Miami Beach requires you to provide the same information as if you were writing a report for a permit. Click. The city of Doral requires you in your arborist report for us to be able to review. Okay, you get it. Residential property currently occupied by the homeowner. One of the things that I've talked about, and again, click, not an attorney, just me as an expert. It doesn't say homestead exemption only. So it doesn't mean that the actual homeowner needs to be there. It's a residential property. So it would take your city attorney, again, to make a determination that they're going to fight that if the owner doesn't actually live there, or if it's not a homestead exempt property, it doesn't count as single family, so they're not allowed to use this. I think that would be a struggle, but maybe that's going to be happening. And if your city is making determinations like that, share that with the Landscape Inspectors Association. We all learn from each other. So what one city does or another can really help be a precedent that other cities or other people in other cities can use. That's why I put up that Coral Gables letter. That for me is a good starting place for you to share with your attorney, whose advice to you for the last 3 or 4 years has been, if they say they have a letter, tell them that you're never going to do the inspection and they won't get a violation. I'm trying to give you the opportunity to enforce your code. That's what I'm here for. So, latest case law trends on the matter, click not an attorney. And I don't have the case law because nobody's paying me right now to research the case law so that I have the list of cases. But I have attorneys that are getting paid by their cities to keep up with it a lot more than other city attorneys. So if you want more information about that, let me know. I can follow up with you. So below moderate does not mean equal to moderate. That's my point. Below moderate means like the tree has no reason that it would fall, which is hard for me to get to. So what I'm, saying to everybody today is there may be other ways to reduce the risk to the tree for and I'll just say the dead or broken leader on one side, which would be to cut back or remove that leader. Or the tree that is uprooted and may fall over would be to cut the roots, dig, replant, brace up, reset the tree. So there are options other than removal, but some of them obviously are, quote, more expensive than others, and some of them may not actually bring the tree back to the health condition it was before it was damaged. Violation fees or fines given for removal without permits. I do appraisals, right? My other company is Landscape Economics. I'm titled as a landscape economist. I've done appraisals for trees removed without permits, over $60,000 for one tree. And it stood as the reasonable value for that tree. That's a pretty big tree. That's the centerpiece of the front yard of a pretty big property. But again, almost every city has a different code when it comes to how that's determined. For some cities, it's one tree to replace one tree. For some cities, it's inch per inch diameter. In Miami-Dade County, let me put my hat back on. I'm talking to Miami-Dade County. It's normally going to be the square feet of canopy across the county, and different cities are different, but at 18 inches or larger, it's going to be a appraised value of the tree. Right. So Collier County, less codes to enforce, so less opportunity to decide whether a tree should or shouldn't have been removed. I get that. I got work that we're doing in Collier County. We've actually done some homeowner association turnover inspections for some of the new developments and get into where trees were supposedly being preserved, but actually got pretty abused through the whole process. So we run into a number of locations where people are asking if they need to use the exemption or not. But if there's no permit required for removing a tree in your property, no matter what condition it is, then there really isn't a review to do, right? Post-tropical storm pruning and exemption, that would be what? Stub cutting the tree in the new and improved restoration pruning practices that are being promoted. I'm looking at that, as to what is the rest of the story with that tree. Are there stress fractures or cracks that are below where those cuts are being made? Are there other reasons for that tree to be considered a risk? Just because a tree is stub cut yesterday and only has 4 leaders, each of which is 16 to 20 inches in diameter, doesn't mean it's a hazard. It does mean it's tree abuse and probably a violation in almost every city as well as Miami-Dade County. But a hat rack tree that's standing there as a tall stump probably is less of a potential hazard than it was before they abused it. Just saying. Yeah, so the disposition being on there is something to be done. Ormond Beach. I'm going to skip through all the thanks and thanks. I don't have to read all of those, but I appreciate them. Right. And here's one I will stop on, though. You know what? Each one of us probably is a homeowner. Some of us are apartment owners or condo owners or renters. But, most of us live somewhere, and there are probably trees somewhere around the property or nearby. So, yeah, everything I'm talking about today is meant to help everybody who wants to learn what this law says and doesn't say and how it should be applied, do a better job of, as I said before, working within the law. So, yes, that's the problem, Harold. If the tree meets the requirements, then the city is not allowed to require mitigation. But one of the things that I didn't write down, and I'm going to apologize that I should have covered, is that aside from your tree mitigation for trees being removed, if it was a tree permit, most cities have minimum zoning requirements for landscapes and for trees, like residential lots that are of 50 feet width or larger require 2 canopy trees in the front yard, 1 canopy tree or 2 canopy trees in the street swale where a swale exists, 1 canopy tree or canopy tree and ornamentals in the backyard. The front of the house must have a visual screening hedge. So even for properties where the tree got removed and everything met this requirement, coming back and saying, great, you removed the tree and we're not requiring replacement of that tree. Now we're requiring enforcement of our minimum zoning requirements. And I meant to make that its own slide, so I apologize for leaving that out. But that's the big, how do you get replacement when replacement's not allowed under this law? You go to a different regulation that has nothing to do with whether they removed the tree or not. It has to do with whether their property on the day you inspected it, and I realized the fact is after the tree got removed, meets the zoning requirements. You're not there about the tree. You keep telling the homeowner, I'm not here because you removed the tree. I'm here because I'm standing in your front yard and there's no trees and the city requires 2 trees. So you have a zoning violation, not a tree removal violation, but a zoning violation. So I hope that makes sense. And again, I really meant to make that a major point. So thanks for bringing that up and triggering that. John has more to say. before John's time is up and you can't listen to me anymore. ISA or LF, take an ethical position. So the certifications are, up for question. I don't think landscape inspectors really has a methodology in place, but ISA does. That's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars level, reviewed by attorneys and their insurance, to be able to have a process for ethics violations where at the end the arborists can lose their certification, and there are arborists that do, but it's a pretty involved process like any other profession. And there is a similar process for landscape architects in regards to their state license, but that's through the Florida Department of Professional Business Regulation. So we could talk about, as another class, what it is to bring an ethics violation and what the steps are. I'd love to go through that with you guys, but you gotta, be able to go through it. So would have to write a report versus documentation. And Doug, that's why it says documentation. I can talk to you for a whole nother hour about all the intent of the wording being vague, or the wording being not the words that are actually in the ISA BMPs, and the intent of that by attorneys. Click, not because I'm an attorney giving you legal opinions, but because I'm an expert that attorneys come to so that they can give legal opinions. It's interesting and it's disturbing when vague terms are used, or when terms are chosen to be in a law as opposed to the term that everybody in that industry would use and would have expected to be in the law. This is a law that happened. So certified arborist, and you do your own report for your own house, and you take $1 from one pocket and you put it in your other pocket, so you paid yourself for your report. I guess you're just willing to roll the dice that nobody's going to ask you whether you should have removed that tree or not. I would have somebody else come and do that tree inspection just for the sake of it being looking right. I think ethically you could actually do that report, but again, not part of this class. So a landscape architect versus a certified arborist making these decisions. There are plenty of landscape architects that I know that can do an inspection of a dead and dying queen palm that has a Ganoderma conch on it. There are plenty of landscape architects that I know that could make an inspection from an oak tree or a poinciana tree or a gumbo limbo tree and be able to identify what the risks are, as well as what the the risk level of the tree is, where the targets are, the likelihood for failure, all of these things, because as you remember, following the ISA BMP tree risk assessment, it doesn't matter which profession you are, you got to follow all of that. So if you're not trained in that, I would say you should consider strongly not offering to do these reports. And BMP requirements. So all I have to say to that, Laura, is that, yeah, that's why they wrote it. That's why it's required. And you need to follow the procedures or the practices and or the steps. But I am of the opinion that you don't have to just use the ISA forms, because this is not about using the forms. It's about following the procedures. So I think, John, at that point, or John and Matt, I should say, I have gotten through the chat, shared some more information. Remember, thanks to those who attended, to bring up the zoning regulation. That's your big bonus wildcard answer to being able to put a tree back where a tree got removed. So with that, let me just say again, thank you for having me teach another class, the opportunity to share with everybody the experiences that we have, because I do mean to be a resource to landscape inspectors and others. So again, appreciate your time, And hopefully something that I have told you today is something you didn't know yesterday, so that the time you spent with me was worth spending, because it was worth me getting to share it with you. So thanks.
Thank you, John. All right, folks, we've got it recorded. If you got questions, we should be following up with an email like afterward. But outside of that, I hope you all are off to a wonderful end of your week and weekend. So thank you, John.
Yeah. Enjoy the benefits of trees somewhere in your neighborhood over the weekend, because I will too.